So this is a continuation. We're still, Give Us a King. That's still the book that you're looking through and we're working through. And so it's kind of split into part one. Here we are in part two of Give Us a King. And so if we think here for just a moment, if we could spend just a little time thinking about how we got here, okay? And so we've been through several Bible periods already this year, starting in this quarter last year in the adult class. The creation, and then the flood, and the scattering of the people. There were the patriarchs, and then the exodus from Egypt, and the wilderness wanderings. And that's kind of my favorite time, reading through that storyline right there. And then the conquest of the land and the judges. I think my least favorite time, but important in the big scheme of some things. And now the United Kingdom. And so we're taking 2 quarters studying through the United Kingdom, because there's a lot that happens in that time. And it's not that it's the most incredible span of time, not really. We've studied sometimes that were bigger spans of time perhaps, but there's just a lot that happens right here in this period of time. And so if I were to ask you, and very briefly, we are considering this just very briefly, how did we get to this point in our study? No, this is not an exhaustive review, but I'm thinking about some people who have just joined us, who have, in the last quarter, we're teaching, and we're trying to catch them up here in like a 2-minute review. How did we get here to where we are today? David as king is getting toward the latter part of his kingship. How did we get here? What's happened in the last quarter? Who can tell me? Give me some ideas. Okay, so the prophet Samuel has had a big piece to play in the narrative of what's going on. Saul was appointed king first. Why Saul? And why did that come about? Why have a king? The people asked for the king. They wanted to be like the other nations. And then God chose Saul to be king. Why did God choose Saul? Because we know how that ended. Well, why did God choose Saul?
Same way he chose Judas. This is part of the plan.
Well, it's part of the plan. But what it is, that this is part of a big plan. But also, what do we know about Saul when he became king? He was popular with the people. What else do we know about him? Had a kingly appearance. Tall, stood head and shoulders above the rest. Character. What about his character? Humble. He was a humble man. He was submissive to God. He listened to God. Lessons learned from Saul. What would we say? Don't let your ego get in the way. Because Saul changed. In the end of the story, Saul was not the same man. I know he was the same guy. But no, he wasn't. In character, he was not the same man as when God appointed him to be king.
Saul fulfilled what God promised would happen to them if they decided to go for a king.
God had already told him when Israel was saying, even before Israel said we want a king, back in the days of Moses, Moses said, here's what's going to happen if you have a king. And then Samuel reminded them, God did through Samuel, here's what's going to happen if you have a king. And Saul fulfilled that in every way. So here we are with David. All right. Maybe one of our favorite kings. Maybe one of our favorite Bible characters even. This man after God's own heart. Well, we just studied in our last class or two about, how disappointing David became to us because of his sin with Bathsheba. And you know what? In the lesson today and going forward, we are still dealing with the aftermath. David is all right with God now. Why is David all right with God? He humbled himself. He confessed. He repented. Here's what makes David stand out. If you were to describe what's the difference between Saul and David, real quick, what would you say? Attitude, submission to God, tender heart. See, the difference in the two, at least Saul in the latter part of his life compared to David, their attitude was completely different. But when Saul's sins were pointed out to him, what did he do? Blamed it on someone else, denied it, did not take responsibility for it. David, what did David do? Humbled himself, fell on his knees, confessed, repented. God forgave him. But the consequences of those sins, oh my. I mean, they are just as real as ever. And it's not over yet. Here we get into this lesson today in 2 Samuel, where we are today. Man, oh man, David's having to face some realities, consequences of his sins. And so here we are in 2 Samuel chapter 13 is where we are. Just a reminder again, these PowerPoints. It's like, I really don't expect you're going to read everything on these PowerPoints when you see a slide like this come up, okay? And basically, these are my notes that I'm teaching from. And maybe you read through some of it and you see a point that's helpful to you, or maybe you read something that gives you an answer to give in class. That's okay. Several have asked, it's like if you're teaching next quarter, or for any reason you want a copy of the PowerPoints like from last quarter, you're welcome to them. Let me know and I'll send them to you. It's a big file, but if it helps you in any way with your study, or if you're teaching a class, junior high, high school, and you can use that in some way, you're welcome to it. Or you need the maps and pictures. Just take out what you need. That would be just fine. 2 Samuel chapter 13. Let's just read a little bit and let's get into the storyline of where we are. 2 Samuel chapter 13. In the course of time, Amnon, son of David, fell in love with Tamar, the beautiful sister of Absalom, son of David. Amnon became frustrated to the point of illness on account of his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible for him to do anything to her. Now Amnon had a friend named Jonadab, son of Shemaiah, David's brother. Jonadab was a very shrewd man, and he asked Amnon, "Why do you, the king's son, look so haggard morning after morning? Won't you tell me?" And Amnon said to him, "I'm in love with Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." Okay, this sets the storyline for us. If this is all we knew right here, what would we say about Amnon? This is all we know. Don't go ahead. What would we say about Amnon? Smitten. See, he is smitten. This would be his half-sister. His Absalom would be his stepbrother. Okay, and what else can we say? Oh yeah. So we're going to see that. This is like an obsessive thing, for Amnon. His desire for her. It might be kind of painted in some ways as love. He loves her. You have to second think that just a little bit. But you see, the story goes on, verse 5. And so this is the advice that, oh, wait a minute, let's talk about Jonadab. It's interesting to me that the text says here, now Amnon had a friend named Jonadab. If we just stop right there. Amnon has a friend. So I'm thinking about this friend. Everybody needs a friend. In fact, sometimes it's helpful to have more than one. But how do we define friends, and what will friends do with us or for us? David had a friend. David had a friend. Do you remember his friend? Jonathan. I'm going to tell you, with David, he had a friend. Because Jonathan was completely different in this regard. In 1 Samuel chapter 23, when you're reading through the story about David and Jonathan, Jonathan helped David find strength in God. He was at a very difficult time in David's life. And in fact, it was Jonathan's father who was causing David the greatest grief. And it was Jonathan who came to David and helped him through some very difficult times, helped him to find strength in God. Can I tell you that Amnon's friend is nothing like that at all? He is not going to help him find strength in God. Now here's how the story goes, verse 5. Here's the advice he gives. Go to the bed and pretend to be ill, Jonadab said. When your father comes to see you, say to him, I would like my sister Tamar to come and give me something to eat. Let her prepare the food in my sight so I may watch her and then eat from her hand. So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said to him, I would like my sister Tamar to come and make special bread in my sight so I may eat from her hand. And David sent word to Tamar at the palace, Go to the house of your brother Amnon and prepare some food for him. So Tamar went to the house of her brother Amnon, who was lying down. She took some dough and kneaded it and made bread in his sight and baked it, till she took the pan and served him the bread. But he refused to eat. Send everyone out of here, Amnon said. So everyone left him. And then Amnon said to Tamar, Bring the food here into my bedroom so I may eat from your hand. And Tamar took the bread she had prepared and brought it to her brother Amnon in his bedroom. But when she took it to him to eat, he grabbed her and said, Come to bed with me, my sister. Don't, my brother, she said to him. Don't force me. Such a thing should not be done in Israel. Don't do this wicked thing. What about me? Where could I get rid of my disgrace? And what about you? You would be like one of the wicked fools in Israel. Please speak to the king. He will not keep me from being married to you. But he refused to listen to her. And since he was stronger than she, he raped her. Then Amnon hated her with intense hatred. In fact, he hated her more than he had loved her. Amnon said to her, Get up and get out. No, she said to him, Sending me away would be a greater wrong than what you have already done. What a storyline. What a horrible storyline. And what are we supposed to take away from this? What are we supposed to take away from the story here, this ugly, it's just an ugly story of what's happening and what's taking place. Without any doubt or any question, Amnon's intentions were evil from the beginning regarding Tamar. There was nothing here that happened that was, wow, that shouldn't have happened. I'm really sorry. No, this was a conceived plan from his friend. His friend helped him to work this out. How many times those who are teaching junior high and high school and younger will be saying at this point, I hope, what kind of friends do you have? And whether you're young or old, we need to be careful about our friends. We can have friends that will help draw us closer to God, or we can have friends that will take us away. And so, what are some of the points here that just stand out in this ugly story?
This isn't necessarily something I would harp on with the kids, but the fact that they said Jonadab was the son of one of David's brothers and that he was a crafty man, that description makes me think that he's over here trying to play the puppet master and laughing the whole time, because when all the things happened with Bathsheba and it was promised that the sword would leave David's house and all this stuff, maybe there's still some residual jealousy that David was chosen and not one of the other brothers. Maybe there's always been a little bit, the people that kids call them your haters, they watch you and they want you to fail, or they want to laugh when you trip up. That sounds exactly like what kind of friend Jonadab is. He's watching and waiting for his opportunity to kind of help you along in your fall.
Yeah, does Jonadab really think this will turn out good for you, Amnon? It's like, but, on the other hand, okay, this is my buddy. Hey, I'll help you get what you want. Whatever the purpose, whatever is his ulterior motives is not good. And no matter how you look at this. Jake.
On Amnon's part, worldly and lustful desires are fleeting and unfulfilled. Many times in life, there's things that we want of this world. We have to have it. We have to have it. We get it. It's not good enough. We need more. We need more of this sin. We need more of that problem. And this is a perfect example of that as well.
He's the king's son. And so he already has his own place to live. There are some benefits that come, I'm sure, by being the king's son. And yet no matter what he has, there's something else that he wants. Even when he knows he shouldn't have it. He knows that he shouldn't have Tamar. And yet it's something that he wants, and he's going to find a way and a means to get it. And my impression is like he's been moping around. Well, of course, that's more than an impression. This text tells us that. Why you been mourning this way day after day after day? It's like he's saying, you don't have to be this way. You're the son of the king. He's more or less saying, you can have whatever you want. And he says, but I want her. That's the problem. And Jonadab says, here's how you can do that. So why does Tamar say to him, we get the, no, don't do this. Go talk to your father. He will not keep me from you. Well, what's she talking about? And why? Why is she approaching it this way?
There's a legal way that he can have her.
Yeah. And not force himself on her in that way. And so she, a couple of times she's making this effort, don't do this. You don't have to do this way. There's a right way to do this. But what's the meaning of the disgrace? If you do this, it'll be disgrace. What about? For her or for him? Both. How so? What's her disgrace? She's been violated. She's been raped. What's his disgrace? Oh, he's the culprit. He's the perpetrator of this. And so he does this. So he goes through this. He rapes her. According to the law, what should happen? Stoned. Taken outside the city walls and stoned. I mean, that's what should happen. Okay? It does not happen that way with him. All right? But here, if we can picture, she's pleading with him, don't do this. I will be cast out. I will be dishonored. And after this happens, after this takes place, it's like she doesn't even know what to do. If we can imagine the shock and the grief. She wasn't expecting this. This is not what was supposed to happen when she went there. Sarah?
The elements that you could bring out for the kids here could be the idea that Amnon should have been content in the fact that he was the king and had all the privileges according to him that way, but also the effects of our actions on other people and how if we do something that we want without thinking about the consequence, because Amnon didn't hear what it did to her or really what it did to him, and he just wanted what he wanted, and once he was done, he was like locking the door behind her, and then she's got to deal with all the consequences, and then, we find later in the chapter that he does in a way too.
He does too.
And two, his brother's hatred and anger.
So it's like, the consequences are going to come, whether you think it through or not, which perhaps is a prompt for our youth and for us too. The consequences will come, whether we think it through or not. But boy, if you think the consequences through, maybe it'll keep us from doing stupid, if we think that through. But understand that, just like with David, David knew better. And he, though he repented of his sins, he still had to face consequences. And I'm not so sure this isn't part of the consequences that he has to deal with. Because his house, as was foretold, your house is going to be a mess. Even the sword will come to your house. There's going to be calamity in your house. And boy, we're seeing it now. These are part of those consequences. And so for us to emphasize to ourselves, to understand and to think about, well, you think this through. It's never the wrong thing when there's a decision to be made, whether about anything, particularly something moral. I need to think this through just a little. That's always going to be the right thing. And so, yeah, Matt?
I hesitate to make too many comparisons between David and Bathsheba and this incident. There was some discussion with David and Bathsheba. Women certainly didn't have the rights they do now. Mm-hmm. And there was some amount of, she didn't fight back like, this example. But we also don't have much narrative, right? sin in that. That was known. He took someone else's woman, wife, because he was the king. And now, so what does that pass on to then the rest of your family? So regardless if it's punishment for the sin, yeah, the sword's not going to depart. Or, well, that's the example. It's now sort of infiltrated the house. That's a known thing. These are known actions that even King David has taken.
Yeah.
And so that ramification, just from that example, would potentially have...
It does. It all kind of trickles down, Even the fact that, well, you think about the relations between David and Bathsheba. She was a married man. Under the law, what's the penalty for that? For both of them. They'd both be taken out of the city gate and stoned. That didn't happen. There was a repentance. David tried to work some things and make some things right when he humbled himself. And yet, as we get a little bit more, we're getting a little bit ahead here, but David is going to come into the story at some point, and I think we have to pay some particular attention to his response, or lack thereof. And you have to wonder a little bit on why. You bring up David and Bathsheba, not to get into a big discussion here, but there's a little difference in the storyline in the response between Bathsheba and Tamar. Tamar did what she's supposed to do, even according to the law. According to the law, if a woman is abused by a man, is trying to be raped by a man, that she is to scream to call attention to that. Well, Tamar did everything she was supposed to do. She couldn't stop what was going on. We don't read anything in that storyline about Bathsheba. Just a little curious, and not a point for a big discussion today. People, a lot of discussion on that. We're not going there. But there is this difference that I think needs to be pointed out. So here we are. She has said, no, don't do this. I'll be cast out. I'll be this. Don't dishonor me. In this way. And she's like, perhaps she's thinking, who will defend me? Who's going to be on my side? So she went into mourning. You have to ask this question. Why is a story like this even in the Bible? It's like, I've been looking forward to this lesson, for the last quarter, knowing this is where I'm going to start, this quarter, right? Not looking forward to it. Why is this even here? I mean, couldn't we have some other stories?
Well, the thing is the Bible is God's mirror showing us ourselves. If we didn't have terrible, ugly episodes like this, we could very easily dismiss it as it's not like an actual discussion of human morality. Because people do terrible, awful, evil things. And more than anything, the Bible is here to show us that, yes, this is how horrible it can be, but also this is how wonderful God is.
Yeah.
I mean, I just came back from talking about Judges with the high school class, and the big point that I really tried to hammer on the whole time is like, if you were looking at it from just a human perspective, it is a depressing, terrible book to read. But if you look at it from God's perspective, it is a wondrous tale of endurance, of mercy and grace. There are so many times that God had the absolute right to wipe out his people and start anew, and he didn't. He chastised them, he punished them for what they did.
And he called them back.
He always
Called them
said
back.
somebody to bring them back.
God does not leave out the ugly parts. I mean, everybody wants to read about love and grace, right? But God shows us the ugly parts too. And we see, we get this picture of human nature. And we can see human nature at its very worst. We can see mistakes that are made, and we can see those who are arrogant and turn away from God, and those who, even in their mistakes, fall to their knees and turn to God. The storylines go different ways. This is a really ugly one. But it's real. It's real. This is how life is sometimes. And so maybe we're going to come from this with some ideas about now what we would do. Tim?
There's much throughout the scriptures about sexual sin. When you get to Romans, it sounds like sexual sin is the basest of sins. It is the worst of the worst. And God says, I will not tolerate it. This lust you have will destroy families, it will destroy, we've seen it destroy cities, it will destroy nations, it will destroy
That's right. That's right. And we see what this is going to do just in this family, what this episode is going to do. And that's where our storyline continues. You know, looking a little bit farther, when Tamar runs from here, you know, and doesn't know where to go. And let's see, this kind of picking up verse 17. Amnon called his personal servant and said, "Get this woman out of here and bolt the door after her." So a servant put her out and bolted the door after her. She was wearing a richly ornamented robe, for this was the kind of garment the virgin daughters of the king wore. Tamar put ashes on her head and tore the ornamented robe she was wearing. She put her hand on her head and went away, weeping aloud as she went. Just get that picture in your mind, her distress, her sorrow. Her brother Absalom said to her, "Has that Amnon, your brother, been with you?" Isn't that interesting? Of all the things to say, he sees her this way. And that's the question he asks. Does that tell us anything? Perhaps the obsession was known to others. His character in general. You know, wow. And so he said, "Be quiet, my sister. He is your brother. Don't take this thing to heart." And Tamar lived in her brother Absalom's house, a desolate woman. Where can I carry my shame, is what she was saying before. 21. When King David heard all this, he was furious. And David sent for his son and took him outside the gate and stoned him to death. Is what I wish we were reading. David was furious. Absalom never said a word to Amnon, either good or bad. He hated Amnon because he had disgraced his sister Tamar. Isn't that curious? David was furious, but he did nothing. How do you explain that? I mean, and I don't know that we can say definitively. But what's happening here? Why didn't David do something?
Could be that he knew that he had done the same thing. He knew his example was carrying forward, and what is he going to do about it? Because ultimately, like you were saying, nothing really happened. I mean, granted, they did lose their child. Okay, so that happened. But physically, there was no other punishment that
Yeah.
we know of.
According to the law, David and Bathsheba could have been taken outside the gate and stoned to death.
He's still got to be king, and she's still got to be his wife. So maybe he feels like, what am I going to do that's
So,
going to
like,
change that?
this is never far from the mind of David, right? And so maybe he's thinking, well, what position am I in to say anything to Amnon? You know, could that be it? Joe?
Samuel lost control of his son as well. So this is not just David's family.
That's right.
This David's family is seeing this through other lenses, through other
Okay, that's true. That's true.
I wonder that David didn't go to God and ask for guidance on how to deal with it.
You know, wouldn't we have loved to have seen right now a different response from David? Going to God, petitioning God, what should I do? You know, something like that. Or taking some action against his sinful son. Consoling Tamar. We'd like to see some different storyline here. But that's not the way that goes. We don't read anything about any kind of regret or sorrow from Amnon. We just don't see anything that happens in that way, in that regard as well. So the story's not over. So remember, it said Absalom didn't say anything to Amnon. He didn't say anything good, anything bad, didn't have anything to say to him. 2 years pass. 2 years pass, and Absalom is preparing for a feast. Now this feast has to do with the time of shearing, when all the sheep the shearing is complete, and there's like a party. There's a feast that takes place. And David invites all of his family to come up near Hazor, to where this was going to take place. Invited his father, of course, too, and all of his brothers. David declined. And he just said, this would just be too much. He's the king, of course, I don't think they necessarily had secret service the way that the president has today, who, clears the roads and the pathway. Or maybe it was like that. I don't know. But I think he understood that, okay, if I go there, that's going to be just a big burden, if I were to go. So David didn't go. The text doesn't say, but I wonder if even at that point Absalom's going, okay, Dad's not going to be here. This is my chance. And it is. And this is where he takes advantage of what he has likely been thinking about, for 2 years. His anger has been brewing for 2 years about this. And Absalom makes a plan to kill Amnon. He tells his servants, when Amnon is merry with wine, you take him and you kill him. And their response is, no, we can't do that. Absalom says, this is on me. This is not going to come back on you. But this is on me.
One of the thoughts I'm having is really a question in my mind. In both the case with David and Bathsheba and Amnon, they're in the king's house, if you will. The king committed the sin, the king's son committed the sin. And what I'm wondering is, in terms of neither of them suffering anything in terms of punishment, were those sins known to the public? I mean, we read about it in the Bible, it's recorded there, obviously, for us. But do we see anywhere in the Bible where those sins were publicly known, where the public might have gotten
I had not thought about that.
secret?
I don't know.
I count 6 people that knew about this. Meaning you've got Absalom, David, Amnon, Johanadab, Tamar, obviously, and then the young man that took her out crying. He was told to get rid of her. There's quite a few people that knew something. Doesn't mean that they went out and told others, but my assumption would be these weren't hidden. And Bathsheba becoming David's wife, there were people that knew about the murder. His own general knew about the murder, did it for him, and then you could see didn't really react to David the same way later on in some circumstances. And so just the point, I'm not saying it was publicly knew, but there were certainly...
Yeah, and that's right. It's like I see there were certainly some who knew. Did it become widespread known throughout the land? Well, I don't know about that, but I don't think it was in a vacuum either. That like nobody knew. But I hadn't really thought about that before. I don't know.
Yeah,
interesting.
Clancy mentioned to me to write down was when I'm teaching next quarter the littler kids. These things are here because how many people failed her? They didn't tell anyone, right? So one of the things also would be, it specifically says, now keep silent, verse 20. That's terrible advice.
Right.
That is not really what should
That's right.
happen. And so the idea would be, if this happens to you, and it could, we have kids in our day and age that are assaulted, are all sorts of horrible things.
That's right.
If that does happen.
Keep silent is not the answer.
It would be to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is selfish worldly. I don't particularly blame him for seeking revenge 2 years later, right? I get the instinct.
Yep.
But that's not really what should have happened. He could have done that in a legal way.
Yes, you're right. To think about Tamar, that she lived in Absalom's house, a desolate woman, quiet. She suffered in that grief. I mean, you have to just feel the pain and have some sorrow, for her in all of this. Absalom's anger is brewing. For 2 years, it is brewing. And so when the opportunity comes to kill Amnon, the time is right. And the sword comes to David's house in a literal way, in like what was talked about in chapter 12, verse 10. And so when the news reached David, his grief was intense. First, he heard that all of his sons had been killed. Well, that was incorrect. But then, even when he found out, no, only Amnon had died. Still, the grief is intense when he comes to know and to understand that. So, real quick here, our time's going to be going. We're bouncing ahead just a little bit. In fact, we can't even hardly talk about this. So we're going to get through chapter 13 today. We are now officially one chapter behind. And I knew that was kind of going to be the way that this is going to go today. So chapter 14, we're going to move through pretty quick on Wednesday night to try to get us moving along as close back to schedule. What I'm really hoping is that on this week, Monday and Tuesday, that you will read chapters 15 and 16, because that's for our class on Wednesday night. Just a couple of chapters. I want you to be reading the text, because we can't read all of the text in class. I read a lot of text in class because I just think we should. But that takes time. And so you need to be reading the text in whole, at home. It's only 2 chapters. You can have that done for Wednesday night. Then, God willing, we're going to take up right here, getting to chapter 14 on Wednesday night. We'll call this our closing place right here. Thank you for coming this morning.